viewers or listeners, whatever you are. Hi there to India, the Russian Federation. Wow. I get I'm getting, I don't know how many listeners from the Russian Federation. I guess it may be 100 or so listeners a week. I hope they're doing well. It's kind of a dangerous place to be listening. No, not really. Not as bad as Iran. We had listeners in Iran, guys. So, what the fuck? Well, it is episode 344. What do they call this one? Oh, an appropriately named business. Well, we here in the Keys just went through, especially the Upper Keys. It was supposed to be a tropical depression. I've been here. It's going on. It'll be the 14th year in a couple months. And people grow up here and spent their whole lives here and stuff like that. But I've noticed that we get tons of tropical storms form, and a lot of people don't react to it the same way other people do. And Eta, the tropical storms and hurricanes and systems now are on the Greek alphabet. Now Theta is forming out in the Middle Atlantic, but it's supposed to go towards Portugal, so that's one good thing. So we go through the system, and what happens? You start seeing it form, and then you start sending it tracks. This one, Eta, formed north of in the southern Caribbean, and it went over the Yucatan, and then turned towards us. And originally it was just supposed to be a tropical storm. It ended up being a Category 1 hurricane, which isn't enough for people around here, but it is enough to put up, when it turns into a hurricane, most people put up their hurricane shutters. But it was, people were doubting there's a reaction or something about fucking storms that people have here. Some people overestimate what the damage is, and a lot of people underestimate it. And there's people I spoke to at my place of business, the bar I work at, and I asked them what they're going to be doing. They said, we don't do anything like that. We don't worry about putting up our storm, the shutters for it until, right before. Well, when that starts going, there's you don't want to be struggling with I have the old style storm shutters. You got to put them in. They slide in underneath a bracket, and then they are bolted in on the bottom. So what I did is I covered up my biggest windows, thinking it could get worse, and it ended up getting worse. Ended up getting gusts of 75, 80 miles per hour coming through, which, and it doesn't sound crazy, but we had a shitload of trees down. Yeah, I worked a double yesterday, and so I guess it ended around 3 in the morning on Monday, and I did a little cleanup in front of my house before I went into work, and worked 10 hours. Interesting thing. A lot of people, when you're going through a hurricane, I did a recording on my alternate channel. Maybe I'll download a section of it. I'll put it into my sound effects here section. Nah, maybe not. But the interesting thing about it, you start seeing the hurricane system or the storm system coming, and you're just watching it. And as you're watching it, especially on the local channels here, you can you see the bands come in, the bands of winds and rain. And we had a lot of rain and a lot of wind. You just see it. It's just whipping around. And if you're fortunate, you don't have to worry about anything hitting your house, but you do hear all around you these trees. You hear them cracking. It sounds like the beginning of a bolt of lightning. You just crack, and you expect to hear the boom afterwards. But it's just the cracking of trees. You hear them. The trees that didn't get taken out by Irma, which was really interesting. We lost, we lost a little more trees this time than we did for Irma in this specific area, even though Irma had to be a lot worse. But what happened with Irma, the wind kicked up so fast and hard, it stripped all the trees of their leaves. And I guess you didn't get that kind of without having all the leaves on the tree. The wind's blowing through the limbs without having the extra force being held back for the leaves adding force to the tree, so they didn't break as much. But so many broke because it was just a sustained long wind, and there were some probably a couple tornadoes touching down and things like that. But through the night, you just hear that wind blowing, and you're just hoping, people went to the supermarket the day of its approach on Sunday. They were closing the local supermarket at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and everything's cleared out. All the meat, which I don't understand, meat's not really a good thing to have for a hurricane that's approaching. Because if you lose electricity, then you have more perishable items. But there was a lot of the bottled water went. You see tons of people getting bottled water and shit like that. But yeah, it was only, even, with the underestimation of the wind, we thought it was going to be like 60 to 65 mile per hour winds. The highest, it ended up being 80 miles per hour wind. You can hear glass breaking and things like that. But I don't know how long we'd remain separated after something like that. So you come in, there's, you experience this in a lot of different places, but they had the news reporters coming looking for the most damage, and the damage you see, they saw a billboard, but there's people that lost portions of their houses when trees come down on there and stuff like that. It's not the only one. There's one of my friends lost their front patio. Enclosed patio was just taken away. All sorts of things. And some people have trees fall on their houses and stuff like that. It's a little rough. So we wake up the next day. We can clean up. You hear a bunch of chainsaws going. You can tell the power is out on different blocks because you can hear generators going. This time on Irma, we had lost power for approximately 1 week. And the funny thing about it, it could have been restored earlier, but what happened is they didn't realize they had to reset the breaker on a transformer that's right near the house here that controlled around 8 houses on my block. So they kept on saying it was taken care of when they just, I think some tree trimmer reset it for us, which they didn't like, but what are you going to do? So it's right after they close everything. The day before, they close all the schools, they close all the all the government buildings and things like that. And it's all, so the next day, Monday, it opens up, starts opening up. I go to work. We don't have all the workers yet, but we ended up opening on time. Our kitchen opened a little later. And we thought, we're going to have a decent amount of business. Oh my God, it was so busy all day. And some people come in, some people talk about their cleanup, coming in for cleanup and all that stuff. But all day, it's just going. Then you had the local people that lost power. They were coming in for the food order and takeout and stuff like that. But they were pretty quick getting the power back on down here. I don't think anybody, there's probably no one left today without power in the Florida Keys. We're very fortunate to have a great, that's all I have to say with that. But they're very practiced in the way that they get everything back up. But we had all these people come in, and a lot of restaurants didn't open up yesterday. Yeah, it wasn't that much of a damage, but a lot of people didn't work. They couldn't get people to come in. They said they had damage. I guess it's an excuse. People don't like to work on Mondays anyway in the restaurant business because Mondays are traditionally a slow time of for working. It's not a big day. So here we go working, and it was like a weekend for me. And we were understaffed, and we're doing it. We did a pretty good job. It was a long day. So that was Eta. It's November. It's what's it, the 9th or the 10th? It's the 10th. It's November 10th. But they say it goes till November 30th. And I'm thinking it's a possibility it could be another one, but I don't think it's going to come near us. So, watching the news, I told you I wouldn't do for the podcast, that I would not comment on the election, but I am commenting on some of the reactions. And I'm not giving you an editorial thing or whatever. Well, there is a little editorial comment there. Right after the election, day after they called it, presidential advisor and private lawyer Rudy Giuliani they have a news conference in Pennsylvania at the Four Seasons. At least they thought they were going to be at the Four Seasons. The Four Seasons they knew. But it was the Four Seasons Landscaping Company on State Road near Cotman Avenue, Route 73, Cotman Avenue, Route 73, in Northeast Philadelphia. Mayfair, Tacony, I'm not sure. Tacony could be on the south side, and Mayfair's on the... So yeah, I would call it Mayfair. The reason I know that is I'm from Philadelphia. As many listeners know, I am from Philadelphia. And I didn't recognize the name Four Seasons Landscaping. Obviously, the people that organized the press conference didn't notice too, until I heard later some people said it's next to a dildo shop. And then they started talking about it, and they said the name of it, which was Fantasy Island. I'm going to give you them free advertisement on the show, Fantasy Island, and I've been there before. The reason is I used to live, and I'm going to try to approximate this correctly, but about 250 yards from that place. Now, the reason why I can say I didn't look at it exactly out my window is that I lived at a loft apartment on Cotman Avenue. It was hard up against Cotman Avenue. It was an old warehouse. Used to handle tires in there or something like that. I didn't know if they manufactured or something like that or just stored them there. And it was on one side of the railroad tracks. It was the main railroad tracks, the Northeast Corridor railroad tracks, was the warehouse. On the other side, as you go down that street, Cotman Avenue, the next street down from where I lived was State Road. And if you made a left, there it was. Now, my familiarity did this. I'll have two things. I sold insurance for a little while for a company to provide gap insurance for healthcare when I was in Philadelphia. And right across the street was the Delaware Valley Crematorium Society. It was just a cremation. And this is an industrial area. So I guess, where they have all the chemical companies and stuff like that, that's who's going to complain that you're cremating people in that area. Yeah, it was 250 feet away from that. But, the way crematoriums work, you don't really... I don't know. I've never really noticed that, but there was a lot of other things going on down there. And so it was right across the street from where this Four Seasons Landscape, and then you had the Fantasy Island adult bookstore, which I'll get into that a moment too. And in 2000, in the year 2000, a couple months before I got married, my ex-wife's best friend, we're all in the car together, and we were at something like that, and they thought it would be funny to go. Her best friend with my future ex-wife at the time, we're all riding in a car, and they decided to pull in the parking lot. They said, "Jim, let's go in," because I don't know, we were talking about dildos or something like that. And she takes me in, and she just wanted to take me up to the gay porn section. And there she goes. She takes me. I walk in. I am not comfortable walking because it's an old style place. An old style, because they have the video viewing areas in the back, I guess. Yeah, it was founded in 1978, so they still had those. But it sold a lot of, I guess, DVDs. Who the hell is writing? And who wants to handle that stuff anymore? Who wants to handle stuff that's renting? Do they? I think it says renting on there. I put a picture of it on for the cover story of the show. But who really wants to handle a rental item? You got to really wash that down, because you think people that get that kind of stuff on a regular basis do, they have things on their hands that you really don't want to touch. So, Fantasy Island, though, I thought that was appropriate. No one really approached that. Rudy approached or stated the idea that Rudy Giuliani is stating a conspiracy theory that's being cited now that a lot of conservative commentators are suggesting. Some of them came out with, and now other ones are poo-pooing that there wasn't enough fraud going on and stuff like that. Whatever you want to call it. But it was next to Fantasy Island Adult Bookstore that they held a press conference espousing a theory they had for why their guy lost. And it just warmed my heart that there it was, right? Right there, right next to where I used to hang out. And there's a nice bar there called Fluke's. I don't know if it's still open. I think it still is open. It was a good bar right there. And I know it sounds kind of weird. And right down the street, if you're familiar with it, there's another place called Goldberg Candies. It was peanut juice. It's Goldberg. It was chocolate caramel peanuts. You say, hey, that's a Snickers bar. No, I don't think there's no nougat in it. Goldberg juice. It didn't have any flashy wrappers on it stuff, but it's just literally less than a quarter mile away. And then if you go a little further, a couple hundred, half a mile down north on this street road, there's 2 or 3 prisons. There's one, it's all pink, which I thought was interesting. Pink on the outside with the razor wire, the double fencing and stuff like that. And then you have 2 different facilities. My father used to work at one teaching life skills to the inmates when he worked for the Philadelphia prison systems. And I'd like to, sometime I got to bring my dad in on this show and he could talk about it. So, yeah, that was my connection. I figured I'd have to talk about it. And all of a sudden, the new thing, I think a lot of people that are disenchanted with what happened during the election and they're all leaving Facebook and Twitter en masse, and they're going to alternative social media, and they're saying, I'm going to so-and-so, so they're talking to their people, and they're not talking, they're going to be talking to each other. So it's like I guess it's kind of like going to church. So that's pretty much it. So we got the Fantasy Island adult bookstore moment. And it's a big item. And they interviewed the guy who owns it now. His family had it. And he was talking about how when that happened, he goes, what the hell's going on? They're looking out. There's a bunch of police going on. They've seen coming out, and they seen some security, and then they see Rudy Giuliani, and then they see press, tons of press coming out. And he goes, why in the hell would they have a press conference there? And he looked over, and he says, oh, that's the Four Seasons. And the first thing he thought was, oh, I bet they made a mistake. So the proprietor of Fantasy Island figure made a mistake. And now he's also thought, he goes, this is great. He was, all gung-ho for the interview and stuff like that. Owen Slate. That's the name of the where I got some of the story from. He says you can't pay for this type of advertising. You're not going to get it. And he says he's already seeing an uptick in business, which for a brick and mortar place, that's got to be really, nice thing, especially since COVID-19, because there's so many things people got to worry about, think about germs and all that stuff. And they have a double thing, I guess, at one of those places that have it's not a peep show, because the peep show you got to have someone in it, but they do have the little video things, I guess they have, where people go in. And if you're going to a place to have a private viewing, to watch some porn, they're going to be masturbating or jerking off. So that's got to be pretty disgusting. So I don't know why I threw that in there. I shouldn't say it. But the couple days we had since the hurricane and all that, we had the wife and I sitting home. We were trying to get today I think we've watched a total of, I'm off today, I've watched a total of like 15-20 minutes of TV. That was it, because I had a lot of cleanup, and I'm doing a podcast. So I was watching before the day, was it the day of or the night before, we were watching this movie with Keanu Reeves called Knock Knock. And it's as if the guy had no training to act whatsoever, or never acted in his life. It was amazing. Just simply amazing. It's such a horrible, horrible movie. Great scene with the two young women when they're coaxing them. But right after the first 15 minutes into the film, that was it. There was nothing interesting. It was like horrible. It's like any porn movie that you've seen. And you think about all the movies that are made. How many, the lion's share of movies that are made, I'd have to say, are mediocre to horrible. And probably below that. Just horrible. There's Deathbed. That's Patton Oswalt. One he brings up as a deathbed, the bed that kills people. That was a movie. But people go out of their way to create these things. Think of all the songs, horrible songs. You've seen horrible singing, horrible musicians, horrible podcasters, that's me, horrible books, horrible stories you've read. What makes people think, what is art? Think about it. What is art? Well, how is art? You see a Jackson Pollock painting, and I think Jackson Pollock passed away, but it's abstract to the extreme. It's just a bunch of script. It looks like the bottom. Whenever you see a painting, when people are painting and they use a drop cloth, sometimes it looks like a drop cloth for a house painter, and people will pay $1 million for it. And then there's performance art. There was the guy who, you just see anything. You see, who was a guy who looked like he was Andy Warhol, when he just painted a can of a Campbell's tomato soup can. And I mentioned this previously on another podcast. But that's art. That kitschy or something like that. That's what people call the art community. And I started thinking, what is art? Think about what is art. What is your definition of art? And I do a little research and I start, I look at the definitions and things, and then I look at some of the things that they say, and I realize that for years, thousands and thousands of years, there's a cave paintings in Lascaux, something like that, France, from 20,000 years ago. There are carvings that are, there's a carving of a woman that's about 40,000 years old. They found talons from eagles that were shaped, and it looks like it was made into a necklace. Seashells and things like that. For years, people were doing that, adorning themselves. And years, thousands of years. All the hieroglyphics, things like that. People do the cave paintings, all those things. And what's the basis for it? So the definition of art is an activity involving the creation of visual, auditory, or performing artifact which express the creator's imagination, conceptual ideas, technical skill intended to be appreciated for their beauty or their emotional power that they elicit. So you have painting, sculpture, architecture, music, theater, film, dance, literature, other media, which includes podcasts, graphic novels, which is painting, I think, if you think of it that way. Almost anything could be art. So it's this creative skill. And what's a creative skill? A creative skill, because bricklaying is a creative skill. You have to be, it's a craft, but it's creative. Painters do it, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, almost anybody has a cook. Cooking is an art form. Speaking is an art form. Comedy. All sorts of things. So you have the process of using a creative skill. And then you have the process of that which is art, the process of using that skill. And then you have the product, the process of the product of creative skill. And then you have the audience or people experience that result in creative skill. Now, science you think of science. Science is a domain of knowledge, which you can express and display and prove. And then art is just artistic expression. And you're just trying to elicit a response, whether it's a high response, which is love, admiration, things like that. Think of the Sistine Chapel or the minarets of a mosque, or anything really, like a Buddhist temple. These are all expressing bigger ideas, and they use artistic license to approach that, to celebrate that. I guess that's the idea. Otherwise, it would just create a box. Because why are churches and places of worship a lot of times just an expression of someone's feelings for spiritual, the divine? And what's the difference between that, between like commercial or practical craft? Meaning, once you build a building, sometimes it's utilitarian when you think about it. You think about this big projects in New York or the big cities or something like that. There's just concrete boxes. And then you have something beautiful like the Flatiron Building in New York, or the Getty Museum, or the Transamerica building in San Francisco, the tall pyramid. How do we define those things? Who's the authority that says this is just shit? And I used to say, what if, there's art forms out there where people use human feces, their blood, their urine to create things. I saw a picture of a cat that uses cat urine and feces to make that. I saw one a painting made with flies. All these things. And art is the judgment that it's art is done by the people that are the critiques of it. And it seems that once someone is considered an artist, the license they have, the amount of variability they can do to express themselves is so much greater. I mentioned Jackson Pollock. Originally, Jackson Pollock, you could discern real shapes in there. He did one painting called The She-Wolf, and you can actually see some kind of abstract animal there, kind of similar to Picasso, his time. Picasso. Well, I mean, there was all movements for this stuff, but think of art, because if you were just a painting, originally the Renaissance painters they tried to get as whatever their impression was of that person. And was Goya, the Spanish painter, did these paintings, a lot of religious ones, but they looked modernist. But it was done during the Middle Ages, and these are elongated figures. And they're not one of those archaic ones when I'm talking about these old painting styles that are flat. And so, very one-dimensional, where they don't express depth. So we've come down to this now where in music, consider what is original and what is sampling and what is derivative. And what is art? You have, let's pick someone who's really good. Like a couple days ago, I did the music of Aaron Copland, the great music writer and conductor. But he's a creative musician. And then you also have the Hansons. Is that art? No. Then you have someone like Banksy. If you're not familiar with Banksy, is kind of like the protest, but not exactly, almost like graffiti artist, but he's not. And the big thing was a couple of years ago, he had a famous painting called A Little Girl with a Balloon. And it was auctioned off at, I think, Sotheby's in London. But I remember distinctly, and I did do a review of this, that they sold it for a little over £1 million. And just as the gentleman was hitting his gavel, saying sold, they heard a little click, 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 and we talked about it. It was a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And all of a sudden, you see they have the painting on display, and there's over 100 people in the room. And, I imagine it's all types of people in the art world, and they're watching, and they look at the painting, and all of a sudden they start seeing the painting going down through the frame, and a shredder is shredding it. You see the pieces of the painting coming out at the end, little strips. It got shredded right before their eyes. And I was looking at the faces of people. You could see the gentleman who was running the auction. He was shocked, and there were other people kind of shocked. Not dramatically, though, but they kind of knew something was going on. When I say, obviously, there's something going on, there's a painting that's going through its frame, just dropping down through its frame, and you hear an electrical motor running, and then strips coming out of it. And then you see this woman smiling while it's happening, and you see these other people, and they're experiencing it all at the same time. And the guy who bought the painting, or woman, they just laid out £1 million, and I think they still own it. I mean, that was a crime almost. But according to the artist did not want it sold at auction. So that's the story. And he released a video showing how Banksy never shows his face. He's always wearing a hoodie and stuff like that. Does a video of him putting a motor inside the big frame with the shredding apparatus underneath it. And he ran tests, and he said the whole painting was going to drop through and do it. And what happened? It's only half the painting went through. And as it turns out, the act of shredding the painting increased the value. So the person who bought it didn't even have to wait for the artist to pass away. That the act of destruction became a part of the artistic expression. Now, the number one person I want to talk about is Marina Abramović. She's a Serbian national. She's around 70 years old, or like just then. Very attractive woman, brunette. And she's a performance artist, and she's been doing it for over 40 years. And she and her boyfriend, I'll tell you some of the things they used to do. They used to ride around in a van all over Europe and probably the United States. But they used to do things like run into each other full speed, scream at each other, do all sorts of shit. In 1988, when they broke up, they both started at one end of the Great Wall of China, and they both walked 2,500 kilometers, which is, God, let me see, about 1,600, maybe 1,500 miles, 1,500 miles across the Great Wall of China to meet in the middle. And it took them months. They said it took them months. And when they got them together, they broke up. And that was their intention. But she also did one in Belgrade, Serbia. I was going to say Yugoslavia, but it was in Yugoslavia when she did, where she laid out. She was sitting at a chair, and this is what she does in a museum. And they invite people pay for entrance. And on a table next to the chair was all these implements. There was a feather, a ruler, a stick, all these things, pens, markers, a gun with bullets in it, and a knife or knives. And she got, I think someone cut her. But she was fully expecting. She said that she fully expected to die, and I said, "Wow." I mean, you ever hear the question, "Would you die for your art?" Well, it looks like at least she purports to have done that. But her most famous thing she did, the most famous thing currently, is she went to the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and for 3 months, 8 hours a day, she sat in a chair, and people would come in, and they'd sit. I don't know what amount of time. I'm sorry I didn't do the research. But she was in the chair for 8 hours for 3 months. And, she'd get up and she'd wear whatever. I think it was a black dress or something like that. And she's an attractive woman. There's no problem sitting there. And actually, the people that would come to see her would sit in the opposite chair within, a couple feet of her, and just sit and look at it. And some people would laugh, cry, do all sorts of things. And eventually he brought the boyfriend that they broke up with. She broke up with on the Great Wall of China, and he sat down, and she actually grabbed his hand, breaking the one of her rules. But I think that was it. And they had some, I think, who said, some famous people. James Franco was there. He sat in the chair. And she actually did it. She had a hole cut in the bottom of the chair, so she wouldn't have to get up there in order to have to pee. That would break it. But so, what artistic expression? So if someone, almost anything, if it elicits elicits emotional response from someone, it's put it out there to elicit an emotional response, then an argument or a statement that makes someone angry is art. Fox News could be art when people get angry. Just this is what they do. Conspiracy theories that catch people and do these things. QAnon could be art. Okay? Art is not just the purview of people who are left-wing or progressive. You could be right of center, and there's art. So, where do we draw the line? What is art? There's good art, there's bad art, special. Think about the movies and stuff like all the horrible movies. I have a hard time trying to remember some of them. We mentioned Heaven's Gate, Waterworld, things like that. There's a documentary called The Making of a Flop. The Making of a Flop, where people in the movie business talk about this is what we thought we were going to do. This was our intention when we were going to make this movie, and what went into making a horrible movie. I thought it was fascinating because people's intention at the whole time when they're creating something. The lady that was it Spain? I think it was Spain or Italy. And it was a medieval fresco, I think, a mural on a church wall. And it was called Echo Humana, I think. Jesus. It was a picture of Jesus, and it was faded badly from the years, the paint. And they were going to bring in someone to restore it. And their intention was to restore it. And there was this woman who decided to, I don't know if she was a parishioner or not, but what happened, she took it on herself to restore the painting. And the way she did it, it made it look like Jesus came out looking like a monkey. And they changed the name to it. It's becoming Monkey. But that act of anti-art, destroying art, became enshrined in art because they made a movie about it. Just seeing people's reaction to it. There's the movie Frida. Who was that? Salma Hayek, famous, I think Mexican artist. I didn't do any research on that one. That the story of artists and the story of art and going to school and what is art, people have a tendency that may not feel creative or doesn't see the things they do as creative in art, have a tendency to poo-poo those things. I can't sing, so I don't like, you know what I mean? They may not want to hear someone sing. Or I can't paint, that's bullshit. That's the modern art, that's just a bunch of splotches of color. That sculpture is a piece of shit. But if it means something to somebody, it's art. It's just like, let me put the metaphor to you as a professional athlete. When A-Rod got a $250 million contract, people say, there's no one worth $250 million. Well, yeah, there are people worth it because you get it. If you go in a negotiating table and you say, I'm worth this much, someone's going to come and say, you either are or you're not. And obviously, A-Rod was. So that's the same thing with a painting. People come up with the idea that this painting is worth $140 million. I don't know what the highest cost of painting that ever went for, but it could be a Pollock, it could be an Andrew Wyatt, It could be Da Vinci, Monet. That it's just that's what the era. Nick Cave, he's a singer. Horrible voice. He's a big hit in, and we talked about it on a previous show once again. Guy wrote murder ballads. The guy's famous for that. He has a voice. He has a very rough voice. Not really melodic. Not really smooth. Nothing. I don't think he ever had it. Just think about it. Think of David Byrne from the Talking Heads. He has a new show coming out. And he's doing things like stomping, almost like Rent or Stomp or whatever. He just brings people on stage and do it. People love it. Hamilton. People don't get Hamilton. I get it. I thought it was great. So art does not have to be appreciated by everyone. It just has to be appreciated by enough people. Yeah, it could be ridiculous. But think of it. The Kardashians are famous. So you have what's her name? I can't even recall her name right now. One of the Kardashian, whatever her name is. The head Kardashian, the daughter, the one that had the sex tapes and stuff like that. If she could put out a clothing line or a thing like that, that's her art, her business. Kanye, her husband. Art. To someone. Maybe not to me. Well, it doesn't. And if it elicits a response of disgust or, I just really couldn't care less, then what's the big deal? Art is art. So, Keanu Reeves, I swear to God, I don't know how I've seen him, I don't get it. I just don't get it sometimes. I've seen him in his voice, in Speed, maybe, My Private Idaho, Parenthood, but I don't get Keanu Reeves being a star, but God bless him. There's people that love his movies. They love The Matrix and John Wick and things like that. But if you could just see him being seduced by these two young girls in Knock Knock, and he's trying to be this upright guy, and his response is, I'm an architect. I'm an architect. And the way he said it, I don't even think he said it. He said it like wasn't too sure of it himself. So if people can appreciate and like the movie, so be it. These people that go to Dollywood and Branson and all that stuff, and they love that stuff. You can't account for people's taste. It's just the way it is. And when I say you can't account for people's taste, it's hard for you to appreciate what they see. I'm not saying. My grandmother used to watch Lawrence Welk every week. Lawrence Welk. If you look up Lawrence Welk, if you want to really know, it was a show. It was a guy. He had an accent, but I think he was born in the United States. But he sounded like he had a Swedish accent. He sounded like it was Lawrence Welk. He was born in the United States. And he used to have these singers come on. And it was, oh, God. Maybe have someone do a little tap dance and do this variety show. And they made fun of it kind of on Saturday Night Live. They used to do a bit with Kristen Wiig. And she had the tiny hands and the big forehead and all that stuff. And they'd come out with the singers. And this guy they would do a duet. And there was these 3 sisters or 4 sisters. And she'd be the one coming out who was a little off. But I'm talking about the Lawrence Welk show. Go back to that. I used to sit there. I couldn't understand why my grandmother would watch that. Or hee-haw. Or music genres. I get some country music. I don't get all of it. I don't get how people really love that sometimes. But then again, I like classical. I like rock. I like some rap. I like some reggae. Oh, God. I like a lot of different stuff. For some reason, I can't. There's some people who go and see all their concerts, country stars. But if you put on a typical country station, that's not my cup of tea. So, art can be appreciated by different people and still be art. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not. So listen, if you like the show and you want to share with your friends, please do. If you have any questions or anything like that, please send me an email at jim@keysbartender.com. That's jim@keysbartender.com. I'd like to thank you for listening. Please share this with a friend. Leave a comment. Download all the shows if you want. If you have any suggestions for a topic, if you want to know something about the keys, I'll be happy to talk about it. I'll answer any requests. I'll save it for one of our... If you send me a question by email, I will answer it. And I'd like to thank you guys all over the world and local. I'm in Virginia, Washington, D.C., L.A. Who's in L.A. listening? I don't know. But I do appreciate it. And I'd like to thank you. Until next time, I'll probably do a show tomorrow or Thursday. Until now, goodbye. Here's my art.